the Mayor of Forbes Shire Council, and on behalf of Forbes, Parks and Lachlan Shire Council, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the 2021 Be Road Ready for the Harvest Virtual Field Day. It's a shame for the second year in a row we've had to hold this event online as a result of the ongoing COVID issues. But farming continues regardless of a pandemic, and it's great that all of the presenters that have made time for today's event to share important information with you ahead of this year's harvest. It looks like it's going to be another bumper year, and we want everyone to be safe on the farm and on the road. I hope you all have an informative virtual field day today, and thank you for all being involved. Enjoy your day.
All right. So let's get into it. So our first presentation is the NHVR update. So I will hand you over now to Tim Hanson. He's the Stakeholder Engagement Officer at NHVR. Tim.
Thank you, Mel. Good morning, everyone. And I really, before getting into the content, really want to give a huge rap to Mel again for doing such a great job in being the ringmaster that pulls all this show together. We had a certain rhythm out of doing the virtual one last year, and Mel's just taken that to another level in rounding us all up and making sure that we get a great show for you today. So thanks, Mel. I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview that's going to touch on some of the elements that the NHVR has underway at the moment and also that are coming up. And I've deliberately got that tailored to information that will be suitable for your part of the world. So hopefully you find that interesting. So you should all now see the NHVR presentation coming up. See some slides there? Yep, great. Okay. All right. Just make that bigger. There we go. So you've got the big map of Australia there with the content. So the first thing I wanted to bring to your attention, and it's top of mind for all of us, sadly, and sadly it's the reason why we can't be together, having real cups of tea in a real place with real people. So I look forward to that next year, like a lot of you do. But I wanted to let you know a lot of the things, particularly for the elements of the harvest that follow the harvest, so the harvesting contractors and so forth. You may not be aware of some of the initiatives that the NHVR has in place to assist the movement of transport during harvest and the general freight industry as well. We've got a dedicated COVID-19 page that if you want to know what's happening on the transport side of COVID arrangements with the states, we've got one place you can go to that then has the latest links to the latest information from all the states and territories. Sometimes it can be, for those of you who've got a footprint in more than one state particularly, it can be really challenging for that. So there is also a COVID safety plan template that we've got there that can help you in putting that together for your business. And really helpfully is there's an interactive service centre map that we put together in cooperation with the fuel companies. And I've got a screenshot of it there that you can see. So it's your standard sort of navigation you've got there. It's also got the truck-friendly COVID-19 sites. Things are pretty settled at the moment in terms of where drivers, and I'm thinking particularly of the harvest contractors who follow the season through the states and territories, with places you can go to for meals, showers, toilets, etc. There was a bit of a spike with the latest outbreak that you're experiencing, sadly, there in New South Wales at the moment, where there were rumours about what was open and what was closed. So in cooperation with the fuel companies, we get the latest information there. So if you're going down a certain route, just zoom in and hover over the fuel stop. You'll see it's got the icons of the different fuel companies there. It's also got some, the purple ones are the truck-friendly COVID-19 testing sites. So obviously some places are easier to get a truck into than others. So we want to make that available as well. And the message at the bottom there is really, really important, as you know, because you're living it at the moment, and how quickly it can change. For those of you who just joined, you know, some of you got some freedom on Saturday, but then had it taken away on Monday. So I really, really feel for all of you in that situation there. So to make sure you keep up to date with that, just keep an eye on that, that part of our webpage. The other information I want to let you know about is that the safety management system information that we've had since the changes to the chain of responsibility provisions in 2018 has recently undergone a significant refresh. So the information content to help you has always been there. But what we've done to recognise that in putting safety management systems in place to make sure that in the case of what we're talking about this morning, that the harvest goes smoothly and most importantly safely, that some of you will be starting out and not quite sure where to start. You'll see down the bottom there is a starting out tab there. You've got the next stage. If you've got something and you want to know how to improve it, you can get more tailored information on that. And then if you've got a pretty sophisticated system, but you're looking to continually get improvement on that, then you will go to that tab there. And all across the top there, the numbers 1 to 9 have got tailored information on that. So again, that's a screenshot of what you'll see on our website. Mel has a copy of the presentation, which has that link in there, so you can see where to go to for that. So like I said, I'm just going to skim over a few things here, but if there's any questions that you've got in mind, happy to answer those when we get to that stage. The National Services transition, this is something that's coming up in terms of transitioning the services in the heavy vehicle space that are currently provided by Transport for New South Wales to the NHVR directly. And the timing on that, just so you know what's happening, it's scheduled over 5 years. Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania, ACT are already on board. And we're working closely with Transport for New South Wales to progress that. The target time frame is mid to late next year. So just to give you the heads up on that. And then for those of you who may have farms on the Queensland side of the border, or if there's any harvesting contractors or transporters who do work there, that will be happening in the later half of next year. This one here, there's a lot of words on the screen there, so I'm not going to go through them in any detail, particularly given I've only got 10 minutes and I'm sure Mel's going to ring that bell anytime soon. But this is just to let you know some of the improvements that are happening on the NHVR portal. Primarily, you'll be hopping into that for your access applications for permits, etc. But just to remind you, it's increasingly the hub of the National Heavy Vehicle Accreditation System information and your membership of that. Some performance-based standards design vehicles, the ones we've showcased at previous Road Ready forums and PBS days. Those parts of the business are also on the portal there as well. So there's some continuous improvement there to make that easier for you to use. Electronic work diaries. It's interesting when you have these annual events like this, you look at, well, what's come on since we last spoke, and electronic work diaries were something that was talked about for a while, but they're now in place. There's actually 5 specific providers of that service. We don't recommend any particular one, but some of them will be better suited for your business than others, perhaps because you've got a sunk investment in certain technology. It's just a matter of getting another module on it. Some of them are app-based on your phone. Some of them are system-based in terms of black boxes in the truck. So just to let you know that they're there as well. And there's a whole lot of information on that on the website. So importantly, there's lots of non-approved devices that people think are electronic work diaries, but unless it's one of these, you still need to fill in a written work diary. That's the main message there. There's apps like Logbook Checker and so forth. If you want to use those as a validator of your time records, if you're a fatigue-regulated vehicle, that's great. But to remember, you still need to fill in the written work diary unless you have one of those devices mentioned there. Codes of practice, just to give you an update, since the Master Code was released in November 2018, this is probably best described as in the work in progress space. But just to let you know that underneath that Master Code, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, if you're not sure where to start for managing safety in your business, that's a good document to go to as well. And it's laid out in terms of each of the chapters relates to the various elements that you need to cover off on chain of responsibility. So fatigue, mass, dimension, loading, all of those elements there will be vehicle standards. They're in the Master Code, and we are working with each of those sectors there, those agricultural and primary production sectors, to get specific documents. So keep your eye on those. When they're finished, they'll be freely available, and they're a good device for you to look at. Sharing of rego data. We've developed some time ago a rego checker app. So that's really handy to make sure your vehicle registration details are up to date. Most importantly, the next enhancement planned for late this year is going to include enhancements such as the primary producer rego concession codes, dangerous goods vehicle licenses as well. But for people tuning in this morning, that might be of particular interest there. So if you haven't checked that out, give it a look. You might find it helpful, particularly those of you who have a range of subcontractors in your business, and to cover off on your obligations, if you want to make sure that the vehicle's registered, then that's where you can go. The heavy vehicle law review, while that's being done by the National Transport Commission, and the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator is on the receiving end of whatever gets decided, I just thought it might be timely that to let you know what the timing is on that. Ministers met and were given a formal paper by the National Transport Commission in May this year after an extensive consultation, and there's lots of input from industry over the last 18 months or so. There's options going to be developed, and over the next 12 months, the NTC will bring back to ministers detailed advice on those specific areas of fatigue, access, increased use of high productivity vehicles, etc. And importantly, the brief that the National Transport Commission's been given is to develop options that should be ambitious. So that as farmers and industry and transporters and harvest contractors tuning in this morning, you can take some heart from that's a progressive brief that they've been given, not just a polish up of what was effectively the first version of the heavy vehicle national law. And that final legislation is going to be presented to ministers in 2023. So that seems a long way off, but I'm sure it'll roll around pretty fast. So keep your eye on that. If you want to know up to date, just check the National Transport Commission website. Also with our mapping system, there's something that is being progressed there. I know from the conversations we'd had with the likes of Kathy at the New South Wales Farmers, that with the bumper harvest last year, there were some situations where there was so much grain going to depots that they'd get full, so you'd have to go somewhere else. And sometimes the shortest route may not have been on a network, or it might not have been permitted. So that situation will be a lot easier to deal with for local road managers and councils. So if a council wanted to respond to that issue, at the moment with the mapping system, that could take weeks, by which time the grain's well and truly gone. So under the new mapping system that we're building, it's an OpenStreetMaps platform rather than the traditional Google platform and all the permissions that go with that. That will allow the likes of the councils tuning in this morning to respond quickly and update those maps themselves. So that's a big change, as you can imagine, and it's a lot of work involved in that. So it's not going to be there in time for, it's not a job that's going to take a month and be ready for this year's harvest, but keep an eye on that, because that'll make things a lot easier to deal with. So, and then the bread and butter work that goes between the harvests, if there's a route that the council does an infrastructure upgrade on and wants to pre-approve that or add it to a network, that will also be a lot quicker and easier to do for road managers as well. The Strategic Local Government Asset Assessment Project is something that we're doing in partnership with local councils to get a better assessment on bridges. As you'll be aware, both councils and industry in this morning's meeting, that can be challenging because the best way to get there might be constrained by an inadequate bridge or something like that. So we're looking, there's a project that we've been federally funded to administer that's going to deliver a consistent set of guidelines on how that's done, and also an easier way for councils to do those kinds of upgrades there. There's a lot of words there. I'll leave you to read that when you get the presentation from Mel. And just to let you know, obviously moving around harvest time, there's a lot of interaction. Well, maybe not as much this year if people can't travel as far, but obviously there's people who might not be on the roads who aren't familiar with heavy vehicles, be they agricultural machinery or road trains in your part of the world. So we put a lot of effort into educating motorists with our We Need Space, Trucks Need Space campaign. There's 3 specific elements of that, and that's promoted a lot through social media. There's also a Coexist campaign, because I know a lot of the frustration of the transport industry is interacting with caravanners in the cooler months. There's probably not as many out in your part of the world, I guess, as there might be in normal years, but there's still be some there, so it's important to get that information out. So we just let you know we're doing that. Some of the screenshots from there. And that's me. How do they go for time, Mel?
Oh, you didn't hear the timer go off, Tim?
No.
No, I might have to turn it up a bit. That's okay.
Okay. Sorry about that.
You're only a minute over. It's all good.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. So we'll keep moving. So next up, it's the a look from the state perspective, what's happening. So I'm going to pass you over to Scott Greenow. He's the Director of Operations for Transport for New South Wales's Freight branch. So Scott, over to you.
Thanks, Mel. I'll just get the presentation up.
That's all right, and I'll get my timer a bit louder.
Hopefully you guys can see the presentation now.
Yep.
There we go. All right, morning everybody, and thank you for the opportunity for us to speak to you today. As Mel said, I'm Scott Greenow, Director of Operations at Transport for New South Wales. A few of the things I'm hoping to talk you through today are simply starting with the strategic environment that we're coming from, just to describe to you how we see the movement of freight and the successful communities concept in New South Wales as we move forward. So you see on the screen there are a series of strategic documents that work through how we ensure freight moves safely, productively and efficiently across the network. And you'll notice the last one there, Practitioner's Guide to Movement and Place. It's really key. A lot of the times we've spoken quite heavily around the movement of freight, and then separately people talk about successful places in New South Wales. But that last document there very much is a focus on how we move freight through communities and how we make sure that goods are connected to people. So this is a clear focus of the New South Wales government, and we want to ensure that it's done as safely, productively and as efficiently as possible. So the coming years tell us that we are going to have a significant increase in freight movement, and I won't read out each of the items on the screen. I'll let you digest it as we go. But there is a projected steady increase in freight across New South Wales. You'll notice that there is a significant task done by rail. A large portion of that is the movement of coal, but it is critical in this information how important road is in that conversation. So the focus for us at all times is to make sure that both of these modes are as efficient and effective as possible. But it's clear the large portion that road does means that we need to focus on providing access for safer, more productive vehicles. And those policies that we talked about in the previous slide really focus on how we can lift the use of performance-based standards vehicles, so PBS vehicles, as much as possible to increase that safety and productivity across the network. All right, on this one is some road train access. In recent years, we've seen some increases in road train access on the New South Wales network. Using the Newell as a bit of a line in the sand in New South Wales, we've got some significant access west of the Newell, which has been in place for Type 1 road trains and all versions of Type 1 road trains for some time. But what we've seen over the last months and years is that we now have end-to-end access on the Newell Highway. So access through parks is available and has recently been announced and mapped. So that's access under notice end-to-end on the Newell for Type 1 road trains. And we've also seen access grow east of the Newell Highway. So you'll notice Oxley Highway, There is available access for 36.5 metre Type 1 road trains all the way to Tamworth, so just west of Tamworth on the Oxley Highway. There's also networks east of the Newell Highway for other Type 1 road trains, with a slight change for some vehicles that transport livestock loads. So some of the vehicles that are A-doubles, or what we considered traditional road trains previously, A-doubles with tandem axle dollies, have restrictions on where they can travel east of the Newell Highway. But other than that, there's been some significant increase in road train access, and notably in recent times, access through parks on the Newell Highway. All right, the drought recovery program. So this one is something that we're quite proud of, and it was a piece of work that came together through Transport for New South Wales, local councils, industry, NHVR, all working together, and all parts of industry, transporters, farmers, grain receivers, working together last year when it was clear that we were going to have quite a large harvest, and there was an opportunity for us to leverage that and do that in as safe and sustainable way as possible, but also to do it productively in a way that would assist regional communities in that broadacre farming area in New South Wales to take advantage of those crops, get whatever opportunity there was to have a recovery of some sense of economic recovery, as well as do that in a efficient and safe way. So there were some initiatives that came out of that were quite successful. One of those was access for road trains through parks, which we've followed up with that being made available for all road trains, no matter what the commodity is. But we'll continue to work with the councils, and I have to say, express gratitude. I know there's a few councils on today that were involved in this, but we express gratitude to those councils that also saw that opportunity, recognised the additional access that we could provide for road trains to deliver a better outcome for our communities, a better outcome for our farmers and transport operators. And we got that grain to grain receival sites safely, efficiently, productively, and in a way that delivered significant outcomes for all parties involved. So we'll continue to work with those people for this season. We've been told that this season is likely to be large again, if potentially not even larger. So as a result, we're looking at extending those same initiatives for this year, noting that access through parks or for road trains is available, of course. There we go. All right, last mile access. So this one has always been a vexing issue for us. And in reality, these are critical tasks that happen across New South Wales on farms, whether they be grain, livestock, movement of produce, etc., and even equipment going to those locations for deliveries of fertiliser, fuel, etc., etc. So, of course, wherever possible, we're driving towards the benefits of the farm gate access. So we've worked with councils, and we have 6 pilot councils in 2 different parts of the state. So there's a section in the south and a section in the north. We worked with those councils and with industry. Once again, this is a nod to both the Livestock Bulk and Rural Carriers Association and New South Wales farmers in how they've leaned in this opportunity. So the chance to then have access, which is conditional area approval in these councils, participating councils, has with some minor conditions. So conditions like enrolment in the road infrastructure management telematics application. So it's a telematics application that enables almost all telematics devices to be enrolled, and it sends de-identified aggregated data to road managers so we can better monitor the use of the network, monitor the compliance on wherever there are conditional access, but also make smarter decisions around future access, smarter decisions around road maintenance, investment, and smarter decisions around investment in the network itself when we need to upgrade sections of it. And of course, last but not least, we also use this sort of data and analysis to understand better risk-based compliance. So this is where people that are doing the right thing from a transport point of view are less likely to encounter our inspectors, where we're able to target areas that we see non-compliance more regularly. So it's a better outcome for all people that are following the right approach and are operating safely and compliantly. All right, another part of the Farmgate network approach, I'm sorry, here's some slides with where those areas are located. We'll also have been working with councils to provide them some available tools that assist with intersection assessment. So the road manager function is quite a complex task at times, and being able to make a decision on whether or not there is an opportunity to provide improved access with the types of vehicles in that area. It can be an analysis of some complex physics and road geometry and vehicle performance elements. So we've tried to assist councils with the development of some additional tools that will help with, in particular, intersection assessments. And lastly, you'll see 10,000 kilometres of road available operators as a result of the Farmgate network, and that's access without permits. So that's under notice. With the fitting of that RIM application to the vehicle, then, or enrolment in RIM for the vehicle, then those vehicles are able to travel without permits under notice into those areas. Grain Harvest Management Scheme, of course, is another successful productivity and safety scheme that is operating in New South Wales as well as a number of jurisdictions across Australia. It is up for review in 19th of September 2022. The notice needs to be renewed at that point. We're definitely looking for opportunities to improve the scheme, make sure that it's as harmonised with other jurisdictions as possible, but also to ensure that that vital tool continues to be available for the movement of grain in, as I've said many times, safely and productively and efficiently and sustainably as possible. So it will be reviewed and prepared to be renewed for September next year, and will work obviously in conjunction with councils, other jurisdictions and the NHVR to get that done. What do you need to be a part of the Grain Harvest Management Scheme? It's probably one of the easier of the notices that we have, or the schemes we have to be involved in. There is plenty of information on our website. If you Google New South Wales Grain Harvest Management Scheme, you'll go to the site and it will tell you about the types of vehicles, which range from 3-axle rigid trucks all the way through to the Type 1 road trains, where they're able to be used, and some assistance with your trainer responsibility obligations. Another great resource, as Tim mentioned earlier, is the NHVR website that can also assist you with chain of responsibility discussions. And lastly, you'll find the GHMS maps on our website at that same location as well. All right, last slide for me. I can't hear the timer, but I'm sure it won't be far off. The Telematics Analytics Platform, or TAP for short. We've worked with the Transport Certification Australia, TCA, to be able to access or provide access for road managers to the de-identified aggregated telematics data from industry. So keeping in mind, when I say de-identified aggregated, it means it is specifically designed not to identify individual transport operators. What we're after is to see how our networks are used. So where do B-doubles go? Where do road trains go? How many of them are doing that? What's the times of day that's most regularly used, the days of the week, etc. All of these build up a picture of how our networks are used, so that we're able to make decisions that are real world. So a lot of times when a road manager makes a decision, they have to assume the worst. And of course, the worst could be far worse than what is ever likely to happen on a regular basis. So this gives us information to be able to make far better, smarter decisions. And a very clear example of that is the Farmgate network. So with that access to de-identified aggregated telematics data, 6 pilot councils have agreed to open up conditional area approval to their locations that enable operators to go to farms, without requiring permits, without having to plan ahead in the same way that you would if you needed to apply for permits and wait for that approval. So it's a far better outcome for relatively small impacts from a transport operator point of view. And it's the type of approach that we see being valuable across the entire New South Wales network as that trial continues to roll out. I mentioned the heavy vehicle intersection risk calculator. So that's a tool that we developed in conjunction with the Australian Road Research Board and assists, you can see an example of it to the bottom right of the screen. It assists road managers to be able to do those complex analysis for intersections in particular in low volume roads, as well as higher volume roads, higher traffic volume roads. And also Transport for New South Wales worked with those councils to assist with bridge analysis to be able to support the opening of the Farmgate access, which we want to continue to do in conjunction with NHVR across the New South Wales road network. That is the end of my presentation, Mel. I'm happy to take any questions if we had time or come back to them later on.
Thanks, Scott. We're going to do them at the end.
Okay.
Awesome. So we'll keep rolling on. So now we're having a look at heavy vehicle access on the local network. So we'll start with Parks. So I'll hand you over to Ben Howard, who's the Director of Works and Services at Parks Council. All yours, Ben.
Won't be a sec, Mel.
Oh, you're right.
Get my screen up. Seeing that shortly. You seeing that, Mel?
No.
What are you seeing at the moment?
Everyone's smiling faces.
Sorry, Mel. Should be going to my...
Oh, there you go.
Seeing that now?
Seeing that now. Yep.
Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks Mel, sorry for that. So as Mel said, I'm the Director of Works and Services at Parks Shire Council, and thanks for everyone for coming today. And I guess I could just support Tim's words with thanks for everyone that's participating on behalf of Parks Council, and then also Mel's work as well that she's put together in preparing for today. So I guess where are we at with Parks Council and regarding heavy vehicle access? I'll just go through a couple of slides here. So without any particular order, so obviously we start with our long-term strategies and our plans. They come up with our road hierarchy, our collector roads and the distribution roads, so that we can work out what our priorities may be as we move forward. So they consist of the long-term financial plans, community plans, and as I said, long-term road improvement program. Also in there is the traffic count, which we review annually to determine if the freight task is switching across any of our network. We like to challenge our ideas at council. We innovate, we review, and then we sort of acknowledge where improvements can be made across the network. We collaborate, so we have a number of industry partners. We have an internally resourced Rural Roads Committee, which consists of external reps from the Farmers Federation, bus operators, heavy haulage operators. That's been in place for about 6 years now, and allows some community representatives to gain some input into the long-term road improvement program. We also have obviously the industry partners, and many of them are here today as well. We collaborate with. Our program, so it's a cost sliding scale mechanism. All of our programs are generally oversubscribed versus what council can fund, but that is then prioritised against the road improvement program and the community needs. We continue to advocate and lobby across all governments. We do undertake participation in many of the trials, and a couple of those that Scott just mentioned, we actively participate in. We strongly invest, again, with the support of the state and federal government, along with local government input. We've successfully secured significant grant allocations over the last few years, and I'll just talk on that for a minute. So the last 2 years at council has been the 2 largest capital spends for council in the last 15 years. So we're at 18 million capital last year, and we're at 24 million capital this year. So without that funding from state and federal government, so not only through the heavy vehicle safety productivity programs, fixing country roads, fixing local roads, but also through the newly announced ROSI program, and then also the yearly allocations of Roads to Recovery, financial assistance grants and the block grants. We then deliver, and as I mentioned, we prioritise and deliver our projects. So we have an extensive construction crew at council. We look at opportunities to outsource to enable us to deliver all of that work. And then as we deliver that work, we then evaluate. So again, through industry partners, through our stakeholder groups, we evaluate our work and how we have performed, and then where we can improve. Just some current stats, and this is courtesy of the NHVR's extremely useful and easy to navigate portal. So just a snapshot for parks for the last financial year. So in total, we received 760 applications. We have on average a 0 to 7 day turnaround. So some other permits we generally get out in a day or two, and some require additional information or seek further advice, may take up to 7 days, but we're under the 7 day target that we've established. There's a little snapshot there that just shows where we look at industry trends. So Tim mentioned before around pre-approvals of some routes. So council continually looks at where we get the number and volume of applications, and then we consider pre-approval. So there's just a snapshot. You can see a couple of roads there that continually get similar applications. And then generally over the last year, we've had a 91, almost 92% approval rate, with about 3% withdrawal rate and about a 4% denial or non-approval. Just from a council perspective, and not dissimilar to a lot of people, so we obviously have some constraints in how we do deliver. I mentioned the success with funding, however, there still are a number of funding constraints across local government. So namely some of the distributions across the financial assistance grants that council has lobbied for a review for a number of years around the distribution, mainly for regional councils with significant networks. So Parks alone has 2,500 kilometres of road network, and how that allocation is managed. And then also the current grant application process, whilst we are successful, it's highly competitive, and ministers don't like to see grants cut in 3 or 4 years. They'd like them delivered now. So again, with the competing priorities, we're trying to manage how we can prioritise those projects. Collaboration, again, is an area that I think that we can all improve on. Council has taken the lead on a number of initiatives and following support from our councillors to try and improve that collaboration across all stakeholders, so that council isn't just the lead party, but we are contributing significantly across. And then also just the satisfaction. So as I say, we undertake surveys and collaborate with our stakeholders. So we do take on feedback, we do analyse and we review, and then we try to implement where possible to ensure that the competing priorities for what the community desire meets the infrastructure demand and the freight task at hand. The other one that we are just encompassing at the moment, with Scott's mentioning of the Newell Highway opening up to AB triples, is what that impact looks like on local roads in events and detours. So they're considerations that we are coming across at the moment with how do we manage those local roads once fuel is detoured for either an incident or an event, and how we can get those heavy vehicles to continue without having to force any delays or park-ups in those events. But we are working with everyone, and that's it for me, Mel. I'll throw over to the other councillors and ask any questions and answer any questions at the end.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. We'll move on to Forbes now. So I'll hand you over to Richard Jane, who's the Director of Engineering. All yours, Richard.
Okay, thanks, Mel. I'll just try and share my screen too.
Oh, that's right. And I'm trying a different timer at the moment to see if you can hear time's up.
Okay, did that come up all right? Does that come up all right, Mel? Or?
It's coming, but we can't see anything. Oh, that's me. Yep, go.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so Richard Jane, I'm the Director of Engineering at Forbes. And I think what Ben just covered is an extremely good segue into, and very similar to what all councils are going through at the moment. But I'll just cover some heavy vehicle, I guess, initiatives that we've been working on for some time, and also what we've got planned. Now, most of you would know that back in 2019, we built the Northern Heavy Vehicle Bypass to link the Bogan Gate Road to the Newell Highway. We came across an issue when we got to the Inland Rail, and ARTC didn't allow us to run anything but bare doubles across that railway crossing. So, and that was associated with the proximity of Hoopers Road to that crossing. We're working on that when there's a passing loop going in just north of that. When that's completed in 2023, we'll be shifting the Hoopers Road intersection, and we have had a commitment from Inland Rail that they'll be upgrading the signals, and we'll be able to run everything up to and including 36.5 metre road trains through there, which will open up an enormous area or in the northwest area of Forbes Shire Council there. I've got the Lachlan Valley Way West there. Most of you will know it already is a road train route. Now, our plan is to try and get as many of the heavies from the northern side of the Lachlan River to the southern side, and use the Lachlan Valley Way as the major route for high productivity vehicles to come into the Newell Highway, because apart from using the Bogan Gate Road Northern Heavy Vehicle Bypass, we want heavies to use the Lachlan Valley Way to access the Newell, just so we're not getting big vehicles coming through the middle of town, because there's a lot of bottlenecks there that we just can't solve. I mentioned Bogan Gate Road there. Backhammer Road, recently we upgraded that to pretty much every form of heavy vehicle up to and including 36.5 metre road trains. We've also upgraded to HML and LLS access, so the livestock loading scheme. Not all that important for the grain harvest, of course, but for anyone carting in animals into the sale yards, it's a big thing. Just covering off our flood-prone roads, which is pretty topical at the moment, particularly Lachlan Valley Way and Bujerabong roads. If we can, we're leaving them open to heavy vehicles above 10 tonnes. So we're just closing them to light vehicles. But there has been recently some damage, particularly to the Lachlan Valley Way. We've had to completely close the road because it was just too dangerous, and even heavy vehicles would probably tip over if we did have any heavies going along that road. So just keep that in mind, that if we do completely close the road, it's because it's just too dangerous even for a heavy vehicle to go through, and it could tip over. So very topical at the moment, that one. Some works that we're working on at the moment, Ben mentioned the various funding that we're all getting at the moment, and so we're directing that towards the widening of Mount Talbong Road. The guys are actually working on that job at the moment. We also want to widen out Yarrabandi Road, and with the eventual intention of having high productivity vehicles out that way. As you all know, it's a pretty narrow road and just not suitable for long vehicles at this stage. But I'd say within 12 months, we'll be looking very closely at widening that one out. I've got a few bridge replacements, and that's to allow high mass limits on Bunkin Bridge on the North Condobolin Road, Maffingham Bridge on Moreenia Road. Future works, a couple of the Transport are doing, I won't steal their thunder, but Warroo Bridge and Peyton Bridge and Iron Bridge, the three that they're looking at. The Iron Bridge is a realignment of the Lachlan Valley Way from Cowra, and my understanding it'll be a T-intersection onto the Escort Way or the Orange Cowra Road. Quite a big job for Transport to do. Bridges that we are looking at council level, once again, to get heavies from the northern side of the Lachlan River onto the Lachlan Valley Way is Straney's Bridge, just near Bajurabong there. And also another one that we're planning to put in for the Fixing Country Bridges round 2 is the Ledgers Morley Bridge. I won't go through this financial availability stuff again because I think Ben covered a lot of that really very well. But the main thing I think everyone needs to be aware of is that our internal finances really only covers our operation and maintenance, and really just keeps things to the level that they are now. Any improvements, we really require external funding. I've got down there flood proofing versus being flood tolerant. To flood proof a road, you're looking at anything up to $1 million a kilometre in a lot of cases. But to make it flood tolerant just means that when the water subsides, you should be able to use the road the very next day. And that's what we're aiming for at the moment. Bajurabong Road and is one very good example where whenever we repair it, we do it so that the flood goes over the top. It could be there for weeks and weeks on end. Once it gets low enough, we can start using it again. And the last point I just bring up, I know the alarm's gone off there, is just I'm a very big fan of the PBS Type 2B vehicles, and maybe Tim Hansen will cover off this a little bit better than me. And it's a 30-metre road train that can go on existing B-double access roads. So from an engineering perspective, it makes it a lot easier to get those over the line. The 30-metre road trains are designed for 2 40-foot containers. I know they're very new and not a lot of operators have got them yet, but I'd certainly encourage anyone who's got that kind of equipment or looking at that kind of equipment. It certainly makes it easier to open up our road network to vehicles of that type. And that'll do me. Thanks, Mel.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. And the final council preso comes from Lachlan Shire. So I'll hand you over to Adrian Milne, who's the Director of Infrastructure Services. Adrian.
Thanks, Mel. I don't want to be going over the same material as everyone else, but I think I might have to. So I'll try and skip through some things pretty quickly. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. So okay, we're good now. So yep, that's just our shire. We all know where it is, up west, middle of New South Wales. But I just wanted to show this slide to show that it is quite an extensive road network. It is quite large. One of the largest in New South Wales, but a key driver of the economy of our shire is freight. It is agriculture. It is moving the material and the goods from farm to market. So council very much understands the key importance of the freight network. We have about 4,400 kilometres of road. That's our road network. 1,000 kilometres is sealed, 1,200 is gravel, but a significant portion is natural surface, which presents a number of troubles for us, but we'll get to that at a later stage. In our freight assessment. We have this is from 2018 and 19, when we updated our freight strategy. Surprisingly, we do have a strategy. Some of our stakeholders don't believe that we do, but there is some method to how we invest and where we invest and why we invest in certain road projects. So this road hierarchy is developed combining traffic volumes, traffic type, bus routes, local geography, key freight linkages, freight nodes, and this helps us set our maintenance levels, our intervention levels, our levels of service, and drives the decision making behind where we invest the dollars and why. This is the B-double connectivity route. Now this is from 2019, so it is a little bit old. We have a relatively open road network compared to our neighbours to the east, but this is because we have geography in our favour. We don't have as many hills, we don't have as many tight turns, so our network is a lot more open. That does present some challenges, but it allows for some greater, longer freight movements. So in the assessment, we looked at interconnectivity between where the freight's coming from and where it's going to, where we connect in with our neighbours, some key constrictions within our network, and where we need to upgrade. We did the same for Type A road trains and their interconnectivity and some opportunities there. AB triple opportunities and constraints, as well as other modes of transport that can't be forgotten. Big opportunities to link in with the activation precinct that Parks has got going on. A tremendous opportunity there to get some higher freight movements onto rail, not just road. And our council's also looking at the opportunities of a spur line to Condobolin and to link in with that national logistics hub there. So all that study leads to the key freight routes, combination of regional roads, our sealed roads, as well as gravel roads that need additional gravel to improve the freight connectivity. This is a strong tool that not only helps us in our grant writing and our grant proposals, but also helps us respond to stakeholders and customer requests for road upgrades and additional maintenance activities. It helps us justify when we say yes and when we say no, just wait, and when we say no to the request for a sealed reruns driveway. So this led to, well, here's just a quick map that I did of some of the recent road upgrades that we've done. Just a lot of road strengthening, road widening, a little bit of seal extension, bridge improvements. It's really helpful in the decision making and applying for grants. So the freight strategy helps us strategically invest the money in the right areas. It helps us get a better outcome for people driving and people wanting to deliver freight. It helps us increase our opportunity to operate the freight network in our flood events, much the same as what Richard mentioned. Not flood proofing, but increased flood immunity, increased efficiency and safety in freight movement, intermodal opportunities for our resources, our grain, cotton, wool, light manufacturing goods and mining related activities, and continuing to move the vehicles which are getting longer, they're getting wider, they're getting heavier, but we want to move it safer. The key challenges that we face include huge grant dependency. We can't do the upgrades without external funding. Whilst rates are important to council, they only cover about a quarter of what we do, highly dependent on grants. We have weather restrictions, so when we get wet weather, we do have to close our roads to heavy vehicles, which does it is very frustrating for a lot of people. Other challenges is a phase shift in grain freight movements. That's just, things are not just moved in harvest anymore, but it's moved during the wet weather months, during the winter months, which is producing some additional maintenance issues for us on our sealed road network. And the question of what about me, just the challenges in communicating why we're investing, where we're investing. It's not always, we aren't always able to deliver everything to everyone. So, and that's one of our wonderful, fantastic roads. So that's it from me.
Thanks, Adrian. So we're going to turn our focus now to some of the other stakeholders that have got some important stuff to tell us before harvest. So first up, Kieran from GrainCorp / the Grain Transport Safety Network. So he's GrainCorp's Road Compliance Manager, and you have a hat for Grain Transport Safety, but I can't remember what that is. But I'll hand over to you so you can tell us.
Thank you, Mel, and thanks for the opportunity to connect with this group. I think this forum's great. As you say, I have this role with GrainCorp as the Road Compliance Manager. Trucks are hugely important for our business. All the grain comes in on trucks and a lot of it goes out on trucks. And we have a lot of risk in our business. We've clicked over about 400,000 inbound harvest truck movements this year down the East Coast. It's phenomenal. It blows your mind when you think about it. So we have risk with mass, with fatigue, getting the right access to our site. So that's what I do with GrainCorp. I manage the risk, so truck charts, our time slotting system, and then improving access to our site, making sure our staff know what to do, which is getting incredibly complex. I'll show you some stuff about that now. Something that GrainCorp participate in as well is this thing called the Grain Transport Safety Network. And I'll get a screen share going now. Oh my God. Sorry, green button. There seems to be a bit of a delay on the screen share with everyone else, but is that coming through now?
Yes.
Yep, perfect. All right. So I chair the subcommittee called, we call it Grain Movements with the GTSN. But the GTSN is made up of all of the big grain companies. So GrainCorp are a founding member. We've also got Emerald in there, Cargill or Grainflow is what they're known at in your area. Maori, the flour miller, are a part of it, and Quattro as well down in Port Kembla. So the idea of the group is we're looking to get consistency. A lot of growers and truck companies will interact with all of our businesses, and it can be quite confusing when you deal with us, because if there's different truck codes, different time slotting processes, different ways that we train our staff. So that's the objective of the group. With the Grain Movements group that I'm part of, the key deliverables that we've achieved are we've got this truck chart. We've got a truck book that goes with it. I'll go into a bit of detail about that shortly. We're also very focused on working with all the regulators towards getting a national harvest management scheme. It's very different. I'll show you some of that as we go through the truck chart, just to share the differences. So just starting with, so the website that we use is gtsn.com.au. And I encourage anyone who's delivering to GrainCorp, Grainflow, Emerald to please familiarise yourself with this site, because this is where we're all putting information that's the same. We've got this, GrainCorp has the same information on our website, as do all of these companies. But it just makes it, it'll make, if you're a truck driver or a grower coming to our site, your customer experience when you come onto our site much easier if you can familiarise yourself with some of these documents. So the first document that's the most important is the truck chart. So all of the GTSN members now use the same codes, and we all have this same chart up at our site. There's 12 codes on the chart. Outside of harvest for GrainCorp, it represents 99% of the truck movements that we deal with. So we have 94 active codes in the book, which I'll go into in a sec, but these 12 are most of what we deal with outside of harvest. During harvest, it's about 96, 97. So we do get some pretty wonderful and wacky combinations during harvest. Harvest is grower trucks is sometimes where trucks go to dry. We still see pig trailers and things like that out there. And so we do have these different combinations, but this chart here has the different mass limits. I'll I'll check in with Scott's comment about the work towards a national harvest management scheme. The chart is quite graphic in the way that it illustrates the differences between the schemes. As an example, what we call a Code 16 truck with a 3-axle dog doesn't get a harvest mass limit in Victoria. All of the harvest mass limits are different in every single state. So this is the sort of stuff that we have to work towards, and trying to get some consistency there is really helpful. In New South Wales, most of the trucks are either during harvest, most of the trucks, 83% run to the harvest mass limits. We've seen really strong uptake there. The difference is made up of your trucks running concessional mass, your PBS trucks, and your trucks running higher mass. We've got tips and which notices down the bottom. Outside of harvest, most of the trucks in New South Wales are running CML, so I have one of these stickers. So the idea of this chart is to make it super simple. So the message for anyone delivering to us this harvest is, before you arrive at site, familiarise yourself with your truck code, either using this or the book, which I'll drill into in a sec, and then just know the access as well for your site. In Parkes, Ford, Lachlan, your shires are great, really good access right across the board. B-double, road train, PBS and AB triple access is very, very good across the entire shire, and also reasonably good HML access. But it's just making sure that you've got all the right permits, because we will check them when you show up at site, particularly if you're wanting to load, say, the HML, or if you're a PBS truck. They're our risky ones. In terms of the book and the way that this works, so this is the PDF version. We will have hard copies around our sites during harvest, but this book is 170 pages long. That's how long it's taken us to describe all of the different rules and regulations in a really concise way. It's difficult to get this information sometimes off the different regulator websites, because they're all slightly different. So we've built a very grain-centric piece of material that lets people see what the key risks are and what the most common truck configurations and the kinds of permits that they operate under. So with the book, page 2 has your table of contents. That is the key navigation part, and it just shows the structure of the book. So high-level intro, procedural guidelines, so GTSN members effectively operate under this. But then when you get into the technical information, we've got sections on particularly HML and PBS. I'll go into those in a sec. And then the different truck and dog combinations. And then we've got sections that group all the different truck codes together. And at the back, there's a truck code lookup table. So just to start with, I'll go to the end. So we've got a 1 to 99 list of all of the different truck combinations. So you know that you were I won't say code 32 because there's not too many. We do have this new code here, code 30. So if you know that you're a 9-axle B triple, you can go to the back and then click on it. It'll take you up to the page like that and say what the different mass limits are. This one, because it doesn't have triaxle groups, doesn't get to go to HML. Just to skip back up to the top. The other thing with this book, though, is we've grouped now the different combinations together. So if you're running B doubles, we list, or the link's wrong. Oh no, here we go. We list all of the different kinds of B doubles that we see in grain, and then you can click down into the link. So code 68, 9-axle B double, that is the workhorse of grain. Outside of harvest, New South Wales, 70% of the truck movements are with this one. And it lists all of the mass limits. This one's a pretty easy one because it's very standard across the country. Some of them, though, are much, much more complicated. The other sections to drill into, as I touched on before, is HML. So we've got a long section on HML. HML requirements are different in every state. We've had a lot of feedback from the regulators about how we word this. So Victoria, you don't need IAP, you only need an HVAS mass. Queensland, you need to have an IAP permit, and then we're seeing these new TMA and RIM systems coming into New South Wales. These are what the permits look like. This is what our staff will check. So if you wanted to run to HML, please have copies of these permits. We've also got examples of the TMA permits. And then if the site doesn't have HML access, our staff will check for permits like this, or they should check for permits that look like this. Straight after this is PBS trucks. As we had from Richard with your PBSA doubles, we're seeing a lot of these coming onto the network. You can get them right down to Sydney now. They do need a PBS vehicle approval though. You can't just drive these things everywhere. And a lot of the time in your area still now, they will need an access permit to say that they can go on the PBS2B network. Some of it says the PBS2A, or they'll need permits to operate off the network. So it's pretty exciting to see all this innovation that's coming. Over the moon that we had AB triples running into parks last harvest. It was great to see those big trucks running in there. They're so much better from a safety perspective. That's it from me, Mel. I can hear the second alarm going. It works now.
Fixed now. Awesome. Thanks, Kieran. So we'll keep moving on. So next up, it's the Rural Fire Service update. So I'm going to hand you over to Scott Baker and Anthony Duffy.
Hello, good morning, everybody. We'll talk to you today a little bit about our header fires and harvest fires and the best way to prevent them, and the tool that's been developed quite a number of years ago by the Rural Fire Service and New South Wales farmers. So crop and header fires do carry a significant financial impact on your rural communities. That goes without saying, when you lose a header, it's quite a significant amount of money gone. So we like to prevent them before they happen, and then everyone is a little bit happier. So this year you'll hear, you won't hear a cease harvest like you would in the past. You'll hear a harvest safety alert being issued. It's been around for quite a number of years. And when you do hear a harvest safety alert come out, the best thing for you to do is to stop your harvesting operations, check your weather conditions, check the grain harvesting guide, which we have a couple of here. And then once you do that, check your equipment, and then decide to resume operations only if it is safe to do so. So Scott's just put up on the screen a grain harvest and fire safety guide.
We can't see that, Anthony.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I thought it was.
I left the technology up to someone else.
Seems to be working now, eh?
I can see your home screen.
Must be on a oh, you're sharing that computer. Sorry, we're just like. Everyone see that now?
Yep, that's heaps better.
Yep.
Right there.
Oh, hang on.
Right there.
So the grain harvest and fire safety guide, while Scott's getting it up, they do come in a sticker format and a magnet. So we're going to be, Mel will be sending out these to everybody for you to apply whichever way suits you the best, or you can use both of them.
You got that down, Mel? Yep.
Yes.
Has everyone got that? Yep. So your harvest safety alerts, before you do, before I move on any further into how to use the guide, the harvest safety alerts will be promoted by your local radio and the Rural Fire Service Facebook page, Twitter, all our social media accounts, and on their public website as well. So while you're harvesting, you just got to keep an eye on that. So the grain harvest and fire safety guide, is that there? When you're using it, you read your current temperature. So for instance, if it's 30 degrees, and then you read your relative humidity, 15%. If your wind speed goes over 31, then it's recommended that you cease harvest until the wind comes down below 31 kilometres per hour, or your weather conditions change. If they deteriorate, it's believed and understood that fires outside of those conditions, outside of those perimeters, are a lot harder to contain. Do you agree, Scott?
Yes.
Yep. So that's about all I've got to talk about with Grain Harvest Guide. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions on it, and please ask them at the end. Scott?
Thank you, Anthony. So I'm just going to go into some planning and preparations for the upcoming fire season and the harvest. So our main thing is to be prepared and to act early should a fire started. So last year we had a high number of header fires that occurred. And it was great to see that a lot of the farmers were able to action the incident fairly quickly. Remember, still report any fires to 000 straight away. So further resources can be mobilised, because you've got to realise, especially out the back of Lachlan area and stuff like that, the resources could be a fair distance away. So the earlier we can get notified, the sooner we can get assistance to you. If you've got it, have mobile firefighting equipment available. There's a lot of private tankers and tanker trailers and whatever else out there at the moment. Not just our service fire trucks, but yeah, a lot of farmers have their own firefighting equipment. Have that on standby, ready to go. In the paddock that you're working, wherever you are, somewhere that is very quickly accessible. Now, as you know, we have a lot of firefighting appliances out in the area. They are available to use for the RFS members to take out while they're using their headers or tractors, whatever. We do ask that you radio through on our fire radio to advise us where the truck's going to be located at, so we can pinpoint that if an incident starts, we know where each of our appliances are. You will need to remember, though, if you take one of our appliances, you must be prepared to stop your work to be able to take our appliance to another location if an incident starts. So that's one of the requirements, that if you borrow our appliance to be on standby in your paddock, you must be prepared to take that appliance to somebody else's fire. Really, that's basically all. This is just a couple of header fires that did occur through last year. Some probably recognise some of the pictures, they were locals. And yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to ask them at the end.
Thanks guys. Awesome. So next up, it's the New South Wales Farmers Update. I'll hand you over to Kathy Rankin, who's the Policy Director. Kathy, all yours.
Thanks, Mel. And good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. Mel, I think I sent you the slide, so when you've got time to put it up, that would be great. But I wanted to start off just something completely different and raise COVID-19 and workforce and labour movement issues that are really something that needs to be considered, as well as some of the more physical aspects of undertaking the grain harvest. So what we know is that there is forecast to be record-breaking harvest this year. ABARES talks about it as a convergence of a range of very positive factors. And so therefore, having this opportunity, but we also have the constraints of closed borders, both international and state borders. That means that there is a restriction and challenge for harvest. New South Wales Farmers has developed a 10-point plan that we are pushing and engaging with government and industry sectors to actually understand how we might be able to better mobilise existing workforces within country, look at how we might get greater access for international workers who may come in for seasonal activities, and then also consider how safe work practices may actually be able to undertaken within the farm environment. So in terms of that, we're also encouraging our members to be very conscious of their requirements for safe work practices on farm, social distancing, check-ins either through QR codes or by written records, and carpooling for ag workers to be able to move freely to and from the place of work. We know that the Queensland border restrictions, the Victorian border restrictions, and the South Australian border restrictions are also placing pressure on those grain areas closer to the borders, and we continue to try and get increased access for that, because we know that some of the grain storage areas are going to be under a great deal of pressure as they fill up. And the last thing, just in relation to COVID, is the importance of compliance around testing for freight drivers in order to have safe access and continual movement around the freight terminals. That was just a quick overview, because I realised that we probably hadn't really sort of mentioned COVID. I don't want to sort of put a dampener on things, but it's important that that's one of the challenges, but also one of the opportunities that the grain harvest will have to work through this year. On the slide that Mel's put up, I just wanted to highlight very quickly some of the focus areas that New South Wales Farmers has been engaging with government agencies, including NHVR, Transport for New South Wales, to seek to improve certainty and access of movement. So the first one is around highlighting the priority for the funding to be able to be delivered to local governments to increase, to improve regional roads and timber bridges. We know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in preparing submissions, but it's really important. We're halfway through a government cycle where there was a strong commitment for additional money for the regional roads and bridges, and we're very keen to be able to make sure that the barriers caused by by roads are minimised, so that we can have the productivity improvements that are needed from good infrastructure. As Scott has mentioned, the work around grain harvest management scheme, trying to get increased, highlight the opportunity for increased access for road movement. And last year, just as an example, we were successful in working through the farming, local farmer members to get some increased access across the Wagga LGA for some of the harvest vehicles. And then similarly, I'd like to acknowledge, I think Gavin Tom's still on the Zoom meeting, that the work of the Parkes and Forbes branch in raising issues of some of the challenges for harvest receival and traffic flow impacts. So as an association, we work both through sort of high level policy, but very much on the ground in terms of supporting and having our members raising specific issues. The next thing I'd just like to mention is the improving safety at passive rail level crossings. You'd all be aware of some of the challenges of unsigned crossings. You'd all be aware that there was a fatality earlier this year. One of the things that we have been really focusing on with New South Wales Minister is actually how we can get the increased visibility of rolling stock and also increased signage and lights on those passive roads or those secondary roads that aren't major roads. So it's a really important thing to increase the visibility of that rolling stock and signage. Some additional work that we're just doing and ongoing is that Minister Toole announced that there would be new declaration requirements for primary producer vehicle registration concessions. They are to come into force, as we understand it, in October. And what the association is doing is looking to work with the government to actually get a realistic and workable definition of primary producer in order for that vehicle registration to be able to flow fairly easily, and for the compliance and documentation to be seamless. And then I just wanted to finalise with just noting that Transport for New South Wales and New South Wales farmers engage in quarterly stakeholder meetings where a range of issues are discussed, and we can get some movement in terms of, we've had some successes about conditional registration, seasonal registrations, but it's an opportunity for some of the implementation barriers that our members advise us of are actually able to be discussed and hopefully resolved. So Mel, I'll leave it there because I think there's an opportunity for you and some of the participants to ask questions later. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. All right, so we'll move on to the final bit of this morning, which is the case study overview of the load restraint project. So I'm going to do the first bit. I'm sharing sound. I'll go slideshow from the beginning. Yeah, so this is a 2-for-1 presentation. So I'm going to do the first half, which is the overview of the project, what we did, what we achieved, and then the second half will be delivered by Sergeant Martin Ling from Parks Police, and he'll talk to you about the load restraint information that we gave out when we did the village tour. So this is a project that was funded by the Australian Government's Heavy Vehicle Safety Initiative, which is administered by the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. And we worked with our project partners, so New South Wales Police, New South Wales Farmers and Transport for New South Wales. And then when we got to the village tour, our additional project partners were the Rural Fire Service, Safe Work New South Wales, and also New South Wales Health's Rural Adversity Mental Health Project. So why load restraint? So when this funding opportunity was available, we had a bit of an issue with load restraint. So local breach notices that had been issued by police had risen from 77 in 2019 to 115 in 2020. And we'd had 3 quite serious heavy vehicle load restraint breaches at the start of that year. So we thought that this was a project and an issue that we could tackle and hopefully have some impact. So the 2 objectives, so one is about raising awareness around load restraint and what the fundamentals of that are. And the second was about reducing breach notices and incidences that were occurring on our local roads. So we decided we were going to target 3 commodities. So the safe transportation of machinery, hay bales, and also general freight. So these are all of the strategies that we put into place over the last 6 months, and I am going to walk you through them quite quickly. So the first one was the launch. So this happened on a property just on the outskirts of Forbes. We were very lucky that the then Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Michael McCormack MP, who's also a local federal member, was able to launch the project, which got us some great media coverage when it kicked off. So the first thing we did was our online quiz. So we decided that we wanted to get some baseline knowledge of what people knew about load restraint before we did anything. And then we repeated those same questions at the end of the project to measure whether there were any shifts in awareness. So it was completely online. They were all multiple choice questions, and people got feedback as they were going about whether their answer was correct or incorrect and why. So some questions were around chain of responsibility, penalties, and the load restraint guide, as well as some case study questions for each of those commodities. So we got some really good numbers. So 450 for our pre-quiz, 360 for the post-quiz, and we added a question to the post-quiz based on the feedback from the village tour about where you could get a copy of the load restraint guide from. And this was a free text question, so we asked people to tell us. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We also had a prize, so people could win $500 worth of load restraint equipment for taking part. So the video, so we developed, so there's a video for each of the commodities. There's accompanying fact sheets for each of the commodities. And these are just some general safety tips around how to get load restraint right. So doing it right, doing it safely. We had a subject matter expert that helped us to put the storyboards together, and one that was there on the day when we were filming. So I'm just going to play you the 3 of them, which is what we did do when we went out on the village tour as well. So we'll start with General Freight, and I want to shout out to Western Freight Management from Parks and from Orange, who participated in this video.
Hi, I'm Ray from Western Freight Management in Parks. Everything is booming out here in the west, and the freight industry is busier than ever. Moving loads from point A to point B safely is our business. We have a variety of heavy vehicles in our fleet. Each vehicle and each load have different restraint requirements. All our staff are trained because we all have roles under the chain of responsibility. Our in-house training is based on the performance standards outlined in the Load Restraint Guide. We've developed our own checklist, which is completed prior to departure. Load-rated curtains can be used to contain loads provided that the vehicle and curtain systems are certified for that particular application. But remember that load-rated curtains only restrain sideway movements. The load also needs to be restrained from forward and backwards movements to be considered contained. We restrain our load with tie-down lashings, but we also use blocking or containing methods when we need to. Before you use it, check that your restraint equipment is in good working order. We use chains for our heavier cargo and 50mm straps on pallets and anything that chains would cut. When loading, you need to evenly distribute the weight and be aware of the friction levels between the load and the vehicle. You don't want your load to move forwards, backwards, sideways, or up. During the trip, the lashings can become loose and the loads can shift. Regularly check that the restraints are tight and the load has not moved and is not causing the curtains to bulge. And beware of diminishing load. You need a system in place to ensure that items don't move as you progressively deliver. Do it right and do it safely.
And this one's the machinery one. So a shout out to the McIntyres out at Bogan Gate who are in this video, and also the hay bales.
Hi, I'm Anthony. Last year was a bumper harvest and we're getting ready to go again. From time to time, we need to move our equipment from property to property. Whether I drive the truck or get someone else to move it, I'm responsible for the load being secure. Safety is important. The last thing I want is anyone to be harmed if a piece of machinery comes off my truck. We use the Load Restraint Guide to ensure we get it right. The guide gives basic safety principles to help us move our gear. Before you use it, check that your restraint equipment is in good working order, not worn or cracked. If it is damaged, don't use it, discard it and replace it. We use transport chains to secure our equipment. We use 8, 10 or 13mm depending on the size of the gear we are moving. When loading, the weight needs to be distributed evenly. You don't want your load to move forward, backwards, sideways or up. Make sure you have enough anchor points for the chains. During the trip, the chains may loosen, causing your load to shift. Make sure you check your restraints often. Do it right and do it safely.
Okay.
G'day, I'm Anthony and I'm a farmer from the Central West. Last year was a great season. With all the work we've put in, we need to make sure our hay gets to where it's got to go safely. Whether they're square bales like ours or round, the principles for securing a load are similar. When we are loading and transporting hay, we use the load restraint guide to make sure we are doing the right thing. Everyone is responsible for safety. Bales can be restrained by containment, blocking, or tie-down methods. We use 50mm webbing straps to hold down our bales. Before you use it, check that your restraint equipment is in good working order, not worn, cracked, torn or frayed. If it is damaged, don't use it, discard it and replace it. We use double straps along with bracing straps. Always ratchet on the left-hand side, so when we check the restraints, we are away from passing traffic. This load here meets the general dimension requirements. There are some exemption notices for larger heights and width. When loading, you need to evenly distribute the weight. Bales can settle and straps can dig in, so make sure you check the tension often. Excessive movement in any direction can cause serious issues on the road. Where a vehicle has vertical exhaust, it's recommended to use a cap tarp to reduce the risk of fire. Make sure you keep an eye on the bales to ensure they are not leaning. Whether you see anything in your mirrors or not, each time you stop, physically check that the straps are still tight and the bales haven't moved. Make sure you have a plan, because if the load shifts, you need to correct it before you can move on. Do it right and do it safely.
Okay, so we shared those on social media. We played them at the village tour, and they're also sitting on our YouTube channel, and I'll tell you about some results a little bit later. So these are the accompanying fact sheets that we did for each of the commodities. So this is the one for general freight. So they're A5 double-sided. This is the one for machinery, and this is the one for hay bales. So those little QR codes on the bottom for the others, all of them link to the load restraint guide, but for hay it also links to that exemption notice that Scott was talking about earlier for drought. We also made up these business card size cards, which have got the links to where those videos are sitting on our YouTube channels, and these were given out during the village tour. And thank you to New South Wales Police and Transport for New South Wales inspectors. We pulled together some case studies for each of the commodities. So this is what the fact sheet looks like. And we also developed them into some pull-up blinds that we took with us on the load restraint tour. So in terms of social media, we posted about the quiz, we posted about the village tour, we posted about the videos, and these are the results. So there's some big numbers in terms of people reached and engagements. New South Wales Farmers and Parks Council also did some boosted posts as well. So the village tour, this is probably the major cornerstone of the project. So we wanted to get out and do some grassroots community engagement in places that probably have not seen that many government cars all drive into town at once. So we went to 12 villages over 3 weeks. We paired up the villages in such a way strategically that we didn't just start in the north and work our way down. We went to Trundle the first week, and then the next week we were back out at Tullamore. So if you couldn't get to us the first time, we were back close to you again. Coming weeks. So that's the flyer. That's the middle photo is the pull-up blinds of those case studies, as well as the damage display board, damage restraint display board that we took with us. So the sessions started with the videos that you've seen, and then Sergeant Ling gave the talk he's about to give you about load restraints. And then our project partners also spoke. So Safe Work New South Wales spoke about their focus on freight initiative that they're doing, as well as some rebates that they had on offer, particularly their safety rebate for $500 worth of safety gear. So we made the point that if your restraint equipment looked like what was on our display board, it was probably time to upgrade and maybe use your rebate for that. And Phil from the Rural Adversity Mental Health Program also spoke about, you know, where to get help and how to help your friends and what are the danger signs to look for. You can see the little white bags. They're the packs that we put together that included the load restraint guide, all of that, all those fact sheets and other information from the project partners. A lot of the places that we went to are not places that we probably would normally go and deliver this sort of face-to-face delivery. And a lot of them have asked us to come back and do other sessions on other topics. So we're looking at what that looks like after COVID. And so it probably took an hour, this whole session, by the time we'd had our barbecue, talked, and then they probably hung around for another half an hour talking to each of our agencies. So that's Andrew Cope, a heavy vehicle transport inspector there, talking to the group. So we had a bit of excess money left over and we decided that the best bang for buck was to actually put together some more load restraint packs. So these include the guide, and all the fact sheets. So there's 1,100 packed ready to go as soon as COVID lets us get out and deliver them. So they'll be in our local rural supply stores, and we've got some for local New South Wales farmers members as well as the local RFS brigades. So in terms of results, so there was over 100 farmers that came out for the village tour. The videos have had over 1,000 views already on YouTube. So I would say that, yes, we've definitely increased awareness. But in terms of the quiz, if you're measuring that, we did get small increases for 2 of the questions. So one was about what is the most appropriate tie-down methods to use for a tractor, and the other one was what should you do if your load of hay is shifted. So that's good, because that's what we were talking to the farmers about when we were out and about. In terms of the question around the load restraint guide, so 37% of people did know that you could get it from the National Transport Commission. However, 25% of the people that said that they were a farmer also thought that you could get it from Services New South Wales or from your local council. So that's not right. And that mirrors what we heard on the ground when we were out and about. And the second objective about reducing incidents, so we haven't had any this year in terms of load restraint incidences, and we have had a significant decrease in breach notices that have been issued as well. So a 70% reduction on the 2020 figures and a 54% reduction when you compare it to the 2019 figures. So that's really fantastic. Where to from here? So Parks Council are looking at running some load restraint education for their staff, focusing on what their most common heavy vehicle loads are. And Transport for New South Wales, the West region, are looking at developing a similar type of project to this, but for light vehicles, particularly focusing on tradespeople, council staff, utes and trailers and firewood, because we've got a lot of questions about that while we're out on the road as well. So I'm going to stop sharing. That's as much, that's the overview. So now I'm going to hand you over to Sergeant Martin Ling from Parks Police to talk you through that load restraint information that we delivered during the village tour. Marty, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mel. Good morning, everyone.
Awesome.
Just bear with me with my technology.
It's okay.
Skills. I'm a better policeman than I am a technology person. Hang on. I've got to hit.
I need your technology assistant.
Okay. Everyone should have this PowerPoint on their screen, hopefully.
Yes, it's working.
Lovely. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Martin Ling from the Parks Highway Patrol. I've been here in Parks for 2.5 years now. I did a stint in Parks about 10 years ago. I am a city boy. My last place that I worked was the heavy vehicle unit in Sydney. So that was our bread and butter, was trucks, ultimately. So we'll go through this presentation. We'll go through load restraints, which is the primary reason for me being here. A small sort of talk on compliance with the road rules and also how to deal with us. So we'll get into the load restraints. Load restraint or proper load restraint is important for your business, your reputation, and staying out of the legal system. If you don't get your load restraints right, you risk injuring or killing people on the road, be it yourself or another motorist, which is what we don't want. You need to consider insurance issues, civil liabilities, prison in the worst case scenario if you get it wrong. My topic always seems to be the Debbie Downer of these things, because unfortunately we see the worst. We know what happens out there and we try to share it with you so you don't come across us, basically. I guess the biggest thing is, do you want your family or your friends on the road having to face a poorly restrained load? Most people will say no. On the screen there, yes, the truck's on its side. We get that. That's another issue in itself. But in this particular instance, that excavator on the back of it stayed on the trailer. So in my opinion, that was a perfect load restraint. Even though the truck tipped on its side, the load stayed on. So yes, I know, I'm well aware the truck's on its side, but the load restraint itself is spot on. So congratulations to that driver. Here's some examples of load restraint. The bottom left there, as I look at it, is a hay truck that went over out near Lake Cargelligo. Yes, there's some bales that have come off, but again, if you look at the bulk of that load, they're all still on the trailer. Again, that's a decent load restraint because you haven't got hay spread umpteen metres down the road. Thankfully, minor injuries in that crash. But again, you look at the load restraints and fairly well done. On the right is Cotton, which is a trailer that I've only just seen recently out here. The Cotton sort of tucked in at the side and has a big strap from front to back, basically. Just, there we go. So the Heavy Vehicle National Law has a definition of what a load is. And it is basically anything on the truck. So goods, passengers, drivers, any other person on the vehicle. I don't know who else that would be other than a passenger. Fuel, water, lubricants, equipment carried in the vehicle, and that's required for its normal use. Personal items used by the driver, and anything that is normally removed from the vehicle when it's not in use. So ultimately, everything in or on a truck is a load.
Yeah, or on a truck. Your passenger is a load.
Yes. That's the definition under Heavy Vehicle National Law. So load restraints, it's a method basically of securing a load to or in a vehicle so that it does not move or fall from the vehicle. I've said it before, basically no restraint is not a form of load restraint. So you have to have some form of load restraint on a heavy vehicle. The methods that you'll see if you have a look in the load restraint guide are tie down, containing, blocking and attaching your load. And the types of load restraints that are typically used are webbing, ratchet straps, chains, chocks and tarpaulins. The load restraint guide, if you haven't seen it, it's quite a big book. Load restraint can be complex, but it also doesn't have to be that complex. Ultimately, you want your load to stop. You basically don't want your load to move. If you can get that right, then you've got your load restraint right. Yeah. Have you got your load restraint right? Again, there's many elements to load restraint, which is what I said before about the load restraint guide being somewhat complex. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to load restraining, but ultimately your load must not be able to move sideways, so across, forwards or backwards, or up during transportation. And at a basic level, if you've got that covered, your load restraint's probably right.
Which means?
Well, in the song, it says he's no
heavy.
Yeah.
So your load restraint guide, it's the go-to document for police, the courts, the Transport for New South Wales inspectors, and the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator staff. It's everything in there is what we rely on if we are looking at a load restraint issue. So if you follow that guide and you follow it as it's intended, you're less likely to have a legal issue with us or inspectors. It's available on the National Transport Commission website, and you can also order hard copies through them should you want to. Ratchet straps, they're pretty much the main load restraint that you'll see on trucks. They can restrain most loads, general freight, hay, cotton, as you've seen in the pictures. And the 50mm webbing strap, which is indicated in that picture there, it's the sort of, I guess, industry standard, if you want to call it that, the minimum size ratchet strap for heavy vehicles. Transport chain. Transport chains are best used to transport machinery, vehicles, and other large sort of rigid loads. And there's a Australian standard there that the chain should comply with. If you're going to a load restraint, or if you're going to purchase load restraint from a proper load restraint selling place, they'll have all the load restraints that comply with the standards. Sorry, let me go back. Tarpaulins. So they're best used to cover loose loads. In our, I guess in this forum here, grain and soil, that sort of thing. The tarpaulin itself is not a load restraint. So you'll see in that image there, you've got your tipper truck, which most ag or most grain and that sort of thing are transported by. The tarpaulin over the top will assist with containing the load inside that trailer. So just bear that in mind. Again, it's referred to in the load restraint guide. It's got all the information that's a little bit more specific than what I've got in this presentation. We could talk for hours on load restraint guide, but we don't have that time. So some tips: check your load restraint equipment. That's the first thing you should be doing. If it's worn, frayed, if it just looks bad, then it's time to get new straps or chains, whatever the case might be. So have a look at that sort of stuff. As it was said in the videos earlier with Mel, when loading, you need to evenly distribute the weight. Otherwise, you might find yourself in some trouble with the Transport for New South Wales inspectors. Check your load during your trip. So if you're stopping for a rest break, toilet break, meal, whatever the case might be, have a look at the load restraint to make sure that it's still as it was when you left. If it's not, you need to fix it. And that bottom point there, again, if your load shifts or moves, it needs to be fixed before you can, should be fixed before you move. So under the load restraint and chain of responsibility laws, you're responsible for a load on a heavy vehicle if you are the owner, driver, the registered owner or registered operator, and the list goes on. Consigner of goods, packer of goods. So if you're employing someone to come and take your grain away, you will likely fall within the chain of responsibility. So you need to make sure who you're employing is aware of their responsibilities, because if you let something go off your property and a problem occurs down the road, you can find yourself in a bit of trouble. Penalties for chain of responsibility or load restraint offences, I'll go down on the spot stuff, but for a maximum $150,000 fine for an individual and up to $1.5 million for a company. So on the road side, if police, Transport for New South Wales inspectors or the regulator inspectors detect a load restraint breach, the penalties range from on the spot fine of $344 to a court appearance. And court appearances, they can be up to $10,000 fine. Some courts, and certainly some drivers who have sort of made a big mistake or have had a big issue, are getting thousands of dollars in fines. So just bear that in mind. You know, some drivers walk away with a slap on the wrist and others walk away with big financial penalties. So it's in your best interest to get it right the first time and not have us sort of breathing down your neck, I guess. Going back to what I was saying before, if we find your load is unsuitable or it's shifted during a trip, police, transport inspectors and the regulator staff can direct the driver to basically not move anywhere until the load is fixed. That will cost the driver, the owner of the truck, the owner of the goods. It's going to cost money to get someone to come out and fix your load in the middle of nowhere. For example, we do use a bit of common sense, so we're not going to leave you without communication or food or anything like that. We're not going to leave you in the desert, but you need to understand that if it's bad enough, you might end up stuck out there. Getting it wrong, there's a couple of images there with the pallets that are a little bit too wide for the truck. And on the right, a webbing strap which had a bit of fraying on it, and obviously it snapped during that particular incident. So that's things to look out for. We've had a few serious crashes involving heavy vehicle and agricultural machines with loads or other things. We did recently have a driver convicted of causing the death of a motorist. So if you think it can't happen to you, you do need to think it can. And again, as I've said before, if you don't restrain your load properly or maintain that load restraint, you can be subject to court appearances, on-the-spot fines, up to prison in the worst case, or civil liability. A comment that's only a little bit over, something we hear a fair bit. Unfortunately, millimetres can be the difference between two heavy vehicles passing each other safely or colliding. And when we're talking millimetres can also be the difference between getting a ticket issued to you or having to go to court. So just follow the guidelines on width, depending on whether you have exemptions or you're allowed oversize widths. Follow the guidelines generally through the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator website for your load, and make sure you stay within those limits. There's a reason behind them. You've got to make sure you do it safely. It's just an image of a width breach on that particular truck. So a couple of things that I've come across. The two pictures on the left is a load of timber, which you'll see on the middle image, the chain there. That was from when I was in Sydney, ultimately, and this truck was driving down the Great Western Highway past sort of Mount Druitt, Minchinbury area, like that image on the left. So when we finally stopped him, we had to shut a road for about 3 hours, near enough to that, and he had to get someone to come out and take that load off and reload it before he kept driving. So again, that's an example of. That's probably the worst example that we come across, where we have to stop someone in their tracks and get them to fix it. If you're a little car sitting on the left-hand side of that truck on a multi-lane road, I'd be a little bit worried the way it's sat there. And then on the right, there's the hay there, just an overlength dimension breach. So just make sure you get your load restraints right, is basically what we're saying. I've said it a fair bit during the like on the roadside and also during the roadshow that we did. And My bosses probably don't want to hear it. Certainly Gladys probably doesn't want to hear it. But ultimately, I keep saying to people, the money from fines is better off in your pockets than it is ours or the state's. Yes, highway patrol, that's what we do for a living. But a lot of the infringements or charges that we come across, they're completely avoidable. And sometimes I wonder whether people just want to hand over fines or hand over money willingly. And I know if I was subject to some of these penalties, I'd be pretty upset with myself. So as I said, the money's better off in your pocket. If you get your load restraint right, you won't have any problems with us on the side of the road. So just consider those things. Compliance with the road rules. So basically, regardless of the type of vehicle you're driving, you must comply with the road rules as you would driving your car to the shops. There are times due to the size of the vehicle, so your headers, road trains, all those sorts of things, where it's not going to be practical or possible to comply with certain road rules. And just take turning a corner and cutting over the edge line, that sort of stuff. There are exemptions in road rules, but ultimately, if for some reason your vehicle that you're travelling in is too big to comply with, you know, keeping on the left side of the road, that sort of thing, you just got to use extra caution. Because if you're sort of in breach of a road rule and cause an issue on the road, it might come back to bite you. So, as I said, you're not always going to be able to stay on the left-hand side of the road. You're going to have to cross over the centre line, as we see with headers, is the prime example. And most of you who drive headers or operate them do the right thing, and we're happy with that. But just be mindful, if you have to break a road rule, make sure you do it as safely as you possibly can. Because we understand that the roads sometimes aren't big enough for certain vehicles to have an ideal road safety aspect to it. Lastly, dealing with us. So, as you all know, hopefully, we do have the power to stop you if you're driving a vehicle on a road. It doesn't matter what vehicle it is, but if we want you to stop, you should. The next point I say, I guess there is good and bad in every industry, and including the police. I'm not saying we're angels. Unfortunately, some colleagues, you know, of mine around the state sort of leave a little bit to be desired in terms of how they talk to people. I understand that. But if you're stopped by police, treat them how you want to be treated. Be polite, find out what you've been stopped for, even though we'll generally tell you, and comply with any lawful requests. So produce a driver's license or do a breath test, drug test, whatever the case might be. Most of the time, if we pull you over, we've probably detected an offence. However, sometimes we'll just pull you over for a breath test. If the police officer that stops you says you've committed an offence, despite what you think or may know about road rules, most of the time we will only stop a vehicle when we've detected an offence and we know that we can prove it basically at court. So except that at that time, we've made up our mind, and most of the time that's the case. Occasionally we'll hear, you know, there'll be another side to a story which might make us change our minds, but ultimately with road rules, it's a pretty black and white sort of thing that we've seen happen. And we're either going to issue a ticket or we're going to give you a warning, one of the two. Most importantly though, don't argue, don't swear, become aggressive or violent, because the roadside's not the place for that. If you've ever stopped on the side of a Newell Highway in 110 zone and you've stood, you know, 2 or 3 feet from a B double that's travelling past you at 100, you'll know very much so that the side of the road is not the place for an argument or a fight. And ultimately, there are ways, if you believe you haven't committed the offence, there's ways that you can try and manage that. The first step is to contact the supervisor of the highway patrol or general police officer that has stopped you. We can put you in, we can bring you in and have a look at the footage to make your own mind up. If there's footage that exists, you can seek a review through the Revenue New South Wales group, or at the extreme end of things, you can elect to have a matter heard at court. So there's ways to sort of deal with or manage infringement notices or charges without having to have a blue on the side of the road. Something that's come up through my office recently, and I want to sort of clarify something. My office and the Highway Patrol, we don't target a particular group of people. What we target is people who commit traffic offences, okay? There's a criminal element of drivers that we come across all the time who don't have licences or take drugs or drink, whatever the case might be. Sometimes just Joe Bloggs will get stopped for a traffic offence and might get a ticket. Again, something that's come up with us is farmers. I just want to make it clear that my office doesn't target farmers. What we look at is a person who's committed an offence. So it could be anyone. It could be mining industry, transport industry, Joe Citizen wandering down the street. Could be a farmer. It could be anyone. But basically what we look at is, has someone committed an offence, not what industry they're from. We know things are tough at the best of times out here. But for the farming community, just rest assured that we're not targeting farmers. There are some offences where people haven't agreed with what we're doing. And I guess the mud on the number plate is probably the big thing. But just understand we are not targeting farmers for any particular offence. What we look at is, has someone committed a traffic offence generally? Sometimes they're farmers, sometimes they're truck drivers, sometimes they're Joe Citizen, okay? But I'm always happy here at Parks to take a phone call from someone if you have concerns about the way my office has dealt with people on the side of the road, because I'd rather resolve the issue than let things brew in the community. And I think that is it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Marty. So I know that we've run over time. Apologies for that. But I did say we had lots to get through and my timer didn't work so great. I am seeing some questions popping up in the chat around the load restraint guide. So if you remember back to when I was talking about housekeeping, we are going to send you all out a participant pack. So that will have one of those load restraint guides, the packs in it with all the load restraint stuff, as well as some other information from the other agencies today, including that the fire safety chart from RFS. Does anybody have a burning question that they want to ask the presenters?
Yes, Melanie, Jim Watson, can I come in there, please?
You sure can, yes.
Thanks, Melanie. Look, just some comments. We're a farming operation west and southwest of just Parks here. Since COVID, just a few things, just possibly that you and possibly even Martin can just are wearing. It's not only harvest. Since we've had COVID, we're getting a lot of city-based traffic that aren't familiar with agricultural operations, and I'm talking about oversized machinery moving. In our operation, we're moving oversized machinery practically on an average of one movement a week. So, and on public roads, it could be sowing machinery, spraying machinery, fertilizer spreaders, chaser bins to sort support fertilizer spreaders, that sort of stuff. Most of it's slow moving, or up to especially maybe boom spray, self-propelled boom sprayers are up to the 50k speed limit. We hear interesting things on the UHF radio, especially on sprayers. What is it? It looks like a big spider going along a road. But since I've brought this up, that our oversized things. The locals and the truck drivers, especially most of your locals have UHF and the trucks have, so we can manage them by UHF. But the other outsiders that aren't familiar with it, I just like to sort of try and, if through your department, the police department or whatever, that when we're shifting oversized machinery, we do have pinch points. One being bridges, and we can usually manage that with escorts, with our radios, our Channel 40, but also on the roads, culverts. And you just can't get off the road when you've got a culvert coming up. And there's a lot of those on roads. And so consequently, you've got to manage the culvert, but you've also got to manage the motorist that doesn't realise that at a culvert, the road physically narrows for a wide, oversized machine. So we're moving trucks basically in our operation. Our harvest is with grain stored on farm. It's 12 months a year, but especially with Martin, we're moving oversized machinery. As Duncan Gay, the former Transport Minister, says, please turn on your flashing light. Please do what you can to manage an oversized sign. It was encouraging to hear Martin say that, yeah, we do have to go over that centre line sometimes, but just managing, especially with COVID and city-based traffic now that aren't familiar with the rural thing, I plead for a bit of a focus to educate these other motorists. Thanks, Melanie.
Well, Jim, that's a really good segue. The next project that I'll be working on is a sharing the road at harvest project, exactly what you're talking about. How do you share the road for car drivers? How do you share the road safely with that big equipment that's on the road? So that is definitely coming in time for harvest. Awesome. Gavin, did you have a question? Oh, and you're still on mute. I don't know if I can help you unmute.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. Awesome.
Yeah, my question was to Kieran. I sent it on the chat thing. But yeah, just worried about, like it's going to be a big harvest and a lot of the silos are full. We could have congestion at the Park sub-terminal even before we start delivering. And I just wondered what plans, if he could enlighten us, as to how they're going to handle all the congestion at the entrance to the Park sub-terminal this year.
It's a complicated problem. So I can only talk about what's really in the media. We're doing a lot at the moment getting ready for this harvest. In the media, we've announced publicly that we're building 1 million tonnes of extra storage across our whole network. So that is in the works. One site that's in this area that will have an impact is Coonamble. So we are putting an extra 200,000 tonnes of storage in at Coonamble to handle the volumes for this harvest. Now, a lot of the trucks as we filled up out west did focus on our Park sub-terminal, and we are looking at what we can do at that site. We're quite limited though in terms of our options. So Parks is going to be difficult this year if growers nominate to come to that site as the other parts of the network fill up. So I understand that there was up to 1 kilometre lines of trucks out onto the highway, and if there's no other options to deliver and people are opting to do that, that's what's going to happen. We're going to have to work as a group, I think, to manage the risk here. It is, I'd say, likely that it will happen again, Gavin. And unfortunately, we don't have an easy answer to fix it this harvest. Probably not the answer that you wanted, but that's the best that I can do. Sorry.
Yep. I've just got another question pop up in the chat. Tim, it's for you. Is there any update on the pilot escort requirements that NTC was looking into?
I am not aware of any progress recently. I can take that question on notice and come back to whoever's asked the question or the group. If you want to circulate there, Mel, that's a body of work that's being led by the National Transport Commission, I understand. But happy to find out that and get some info for you.
Yep, I can send it out with the other feedback stuff. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Any other burning questions? I know we're just still over time. No, that's great. Well, you know how to find me if you do have a question, and I can chase up the presenters. So thank you all for your time. In the chat, I popped the feedback form link for you to fill in. I'll also circulate it in the follow-up email that will have the links to the video once we've got that sorted, as well as something else. Oh, the answer to Tim's question just then. So thank you for your time. Apologies for going.
Sorry, Mel,
sorry, another question just popped up.
Yeah, there's another one in there.
Sorry, thank you. Good. How do silos communicate that they're nearing capacity? Well, that's a you question, Kieran.
Thank you. There's information on our website about what the segregations are and the operating hours of site. So yeah, please go to graincorp.com.au and the information will be there. Precisely when the sites are filling, I'm not sure how much of an insight it gives there, but we have contacts for all of our sites. Please speak with our operations team about where, if you're planning on changing sites and doing that sort of thing, they will be able to give you that feedback.
Awesome. Oh, very good. Cool. Sounds great. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great day, and hopefully next year we can do this in person and have real bacon and eggs. Excellent. Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Mel. Pleasure.